watch out for deer.
Mic check, mic check. 1, 2.
You guys have similar accents as Illinois people, right? Or no? A little bit different.
Yeah.
We're more similar to Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah, because once you get to Chicago,
I got a buddy of mine.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend of mine that was
Mic
from
check. 1, 2.
Chi-town. I got a buddy of mine. And he used to always go to Chicago, right? And then we'd always make fun of.
a slight tint of
That sounds.
We in? We're on. We're live now. We're live.
What?
Was that a new entrance?
I might have clicked the wrong.
Catchy.
That was a different. Was a little no, but I saw the little 100% thing was.
There's like
was
7
nice.
of them.
We were just busting Tyler's balls a little while ago before we jumped on, because we're making fun of his Minnesota accent. Wisconsin. Sorry, we had friends from Minnesota. Sorry, it's all the same.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
You're Wisconsin, and we asked if Wisconsin
annoying.
and Chicago people, the Bears, they're not in the Super Bowl. They're not in the playoffs anymore. But the Packers. How do you say it? Packers.
Go Tom Brady.
The Packers are the best bucket. I don't know. I don't follow football. Welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity. We're obviously in the garage. It's cold here. Got jackets and and blankets for people and coffee and tea for whoever wants it. But if you're new to the show, welcome. This is an apologetics podcast.
Yes.
Meaning from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer, to defend. Why are we Christians? What does that mean? How should it look like in our lives? What lens do we look at the world? Can we defend why we believe Christianity is the prominent worldview? Why Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:6. And why, hopefully, we make a persuasive argument that doing life the biblical way makes a difference. And that it's the best explanation, as George has said in the past, for all the evidence we have called life. I mean, from societal, personal, when you go through troubles, tribulation, when you do things biblically, are there blessings in your life? When you do things antithetical to a biblical worldview, are there negative consequences in your life? Our laws are based off of a biblical mindset when you think about it. Definitions of right and wrong, even to the atheist, they borrow from Christianity to hold the Christian or to hold God in contempt. It's a kind of an ironic circular argument that they make, because there has to be a source for those definitions. So that's the purpose of this podcast. The R stands for raw, real, leading us to a redemptive relationship. So we have raw conversations about real issues. We do it in a way that might piss off some religious people, but too bad. But the goal of this podcast is to lead people to Christ, not to us, not to any other pastor, but to a biblical understanding of what the creator of everything expects of us, because he is the owner's man. He wrote the owner's manual to this thing called life. And it makes a difference. I mean, there's people that can follow biblical principles, not accept Christ as your Savior, have blessings in your life, and be separated from God when they leave this earth. That's a fact. Because gravity, whether you believe it or not, if you understand the principle of gravity and you follow it, you're probably not going to jump out of a plane without a parachute, and you won't jump off of cliffs because you understand the rule of gravity. But if you understand it but you don't follow it, well, then you're going to find yourself in a pickle. Same thing with biblical principles. We believe that they're transcendent, real, universal, and exclusive. That's truth. That's biblical truth. With all that to be said, if you are a regular follow attendee or someone that follows on a regular basis, thank you. We appreciate you. We hope that you're blessed every week. We're blessed by having the opportunity to share with you our thoughts and to hopefully teach people or show and exhibit or give examples of how to critically think through life and with a biblical mindset. So we're going to defend women today. How about that for an entrance, for segue? This is going to be a pro-woman's show because Jesus is pro-woman. He created them. And there are women, and there are characteristics biblically, and not just biblically, but physically of a woman. Genetically, I mean, there are biological differences, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. It's not even that tough. It's really a simple discussion. We shouldn't even have it. We wouldn't have had it 15 years ago, actually. We definitely wouldn't have had it 25 or 30 years ago, but we have to have it today. I've seen more and more videos, I mean, just ironically, just in this last week, of all these damn teachers that are, and I don't mean all teachers are damn teachers, but these are, that are like, a class, what am I? I'm non-binary. What does that mean? And what are my pronouns? And it's like, man, I hope you're not teaching English. And you definitely shouldn't be teaching biology class. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean, maybe I'm trying to make a little swipe at that.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, what the hell are you teaching?
I wasn't even thinking about the English connection. I was just thinking about, basic common sense. I hope you're not teaching logic.
Well, I mean, but I
wasn't thinking about English. That's pretty bad.
But think about that. I mean, that's a legitimate
They seem pretty
statement.
confused on what.
But
Yeah.
I'm not being, look, I mean, I know some people get sarcastic and they try to be too cutesy. I mean, yeah, we might bust chops a little bit, but we're being honest about that. These are people that, I mean, they're reinforcing to these kids. You can do this if you want to. They're reinforcing to these kids that they're not properly identifying the biology of people. This has nothing to do with what people are dealing with. I mean, if somebody is struggling with their, gender identity, then we should be compassionate. We should pray for them and wish them counseling. We're not going to pray, all these people that have all these different weird ideologies. No, we just talk to them. This used to be a situation that was a psychological condition. There was actually a diagnosis for it. It used to be in the manuals. I mean, when you're talking about diagnoses of mental conditions, and I'm not being disrespectful. This is an objective fact. Now, have things changed? Yes, not because the science or psychology has changed, but because the politics have changed. And anytime we've said this on the show before, that you allow politics to invade any space, it jacks it up. It goes to hell in a handbasket and turns into a pile of shit. Whether it's academia, whether it's biology, whether it's medicine, whether it's quote unquote science, the rational pursuit of truth, and yes, even the church. Anytime you politicize anything, it just goes to shit. It's just a fact. And it shouldn't, because politics, as we've said many times on the show, just really means advocate. You're advocating for the affairs of the city. What are we politicking for? Well, as followers of Jesus Christ, our politics are those of heaven. We're advocating for heaven. We are campaigning for Jesus. That's what Matthew 28:19 tells us to do. It tells us to do something. Jesus, as he's ascending to heaven, his last charge to his disciples and to everyone is to go to all nations, making disciples, students of all men, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. So, does Jesus have an opinion about gender? Yes, and we can talk scripturally about it. How does that affect objectively? We can even, in part of the show today, we can shelf our Christianity for a little while and just look at logically, how does this play out to women especially? I mean,
Not to suggest that Christianity isn't logical.
No, thank you. But I have to meet people. Thank you
Yeah.
for that clarification. But we have to meet people where they're at. There are people that claim it's not. So
You're just saying, without bringing in any Christian or biblical convictions, just simply common sense and logic.
Which Christianity is logical, but
Of course it is.
But
Yes.
yes, you're exactly right. I mean,
It's a reason, basic
you
reason.
have 3 daughters. I have 2 daughters. But where does that put our daughters in scholarship situations, in competitive situations, in professional athletic situations, in collegiate situations? I mean, there's an issue going on at Penn State today. So how does this play out logically? Because we believe that a biblical worldview plays out very reasonably and is needed to have a rational and well-balanced and righteous society.
That's right.
I mean, it just does. I mean, even the atheist, if you had an atheistic society, most violations of a biblical principles disrupt their society. Spilling of innocent blood, murder. Any secular atheist community will say, hey, we don't like murder. Well, that's a biblical principle, because without the Bible, why do you not like murder? Where's the value to human life? You can't claim there's the imago Dei to the stranger. I treat the stranger a certain way as a Christian because I see he's an image bearer. She's an image bearer. There's an image of God, excuse me, in that man or woman. We're going to get back to the man and woman in a second. And so that's why I show love, because I see value, even if they don't see it. But I know that they're an image bearer. So that's number one. So the spilling of innocent blood. Thou shalt not covet. Most societies don't. I mean, I want that person's husband or wife, or I want their business. So I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal. Bearing false witness. Why is bearing false witness, meaning lying about somebody, usually a bad thing for a society? Why is it not acceptable for me to lie, cheat, and steal, to take your spouse, your kids, your money, your business, whatever, just because I want to? Why is that considered immoral or wrong or evil or bad? We've got to have a book or some set of ideas that set out those parameters for us, because if we don't have those parameters, well, then it's just your opinion. And who the hell are you to give me an opinion? Because if someone's saying, who the hell am I to have an opinion? Well, my opinion's God's opinion, number one. So you're not angry at me for my opinions, because my opinions are God's opinions. But who the hell are you? I mean, the atheist believes in God. It's him or herself. So, and I can go on and on. Thou shalt not steal. Honor thy father and mother. I mean, we can go on and on. That violations of biblical principles will disrupt any society, to include atheistic or secular society. So we get back to the topic at hand, which is defending women tonight, right? And logically, and how it plays out in our society, and what's God's opinion on it, and why it matters, and where the hell's the church on this issue, and why aren't we leading the charge as the body of Christ to defend women, to defend, I hate to have to say this, biological women, because the question has to be asked.
So absurd.
I mean, it really is absurd. And it's not
absurd.
And again, completely compassionate towards someone that struggles with gender identity. It has nothing to do with being disrespectful or rude. I don't advocate that, nor does George. But I'm also not going to tell people what they want to hear. I mean, it's just that. I mean, when you deal with the law and I was DA, I mean, people are giving descriptives. What's the suspect's description? I don't know. It was a male. Well, I identify as a female. Don't say it's a male. It causes disruption. We don't understand the parameters of what a male and basic understanding biologically of what's a male and a female, and what that means, and what are our differences biologically in our roles and functions and bearing children, and just there's a difference. There just is, not just anatomically, but also inside. I mean, biologically in every way, genetically. So, with that being said, let's talk about God's opinion about it. George?
Well, I mean, where do you start? I mean, as you're talking, there's a part of me, and I'm probably shaking my head while you're talking, because this is just so completely absurd and just nonsensical. The idea that this is even an issue and it's even a topic for debate shows just how much the culture has eroded, and just how confused people have become. And Nico, I mean, you're right. You brought something up that I think is really important and is kind of explanatory as to how we got here. So if you change the definition of things, if you change your objective standard, then anything is possible. And that's really what's happened. In the American educational system, we've seen in the social studies, we've seen in psychology, we've seen in English, we've seen now even in natural sciences, thank you so much, a basic change of the rules, a basic change of terms, a basic change of language, so that after a while, by redefining things, legal becomes, or what was illegal becomes legal. What was up is now down. What was right is now wrong, and vice versa. What was wrong is now right. It is an amazing and effective way, Nico, to confuse society. So that if you ever want to have a conversation about where we've gone wrong, you can't, because your objective standard along a whole host of issues is eroded. And so we are now to the point, this has been so effective, I think. I mean, I'm actually impressed. I mean,
how effective they've been at
yeah, think about how impressive this is. We're actually at a point where we're talking about what a woman is, where we're actually debating what a man. This is insane. But how did that happen? But how did it happen? It didn't happen in 2 weeks. This has happened over decades of confusing basic disciplines of thought across a whole host of subjects. Like I said, from the social studies to biological studies, this has been a systematic and incremental rotting of basic truisms, basic axioms.
I love this.
It's very effective. Here we are. Well, let's defend women. A woman is a woman. Can you believe we're here? This is nuts. This is like, what are we, 5 years old? Get in a time machine, go back 30 years, and let people see what we're talking about today, and they will think we've lost our you-know-what minds. This is nuts. Are you kidding me? There is, let me just say it up front, and I'll shut up and I'll let you continue. There is zero doubt that a biological woman is the only legitimate actual woman there is. There is zero doubt. I don't care how much language reconstruction you're subjected to. It is a fundamental biological, genetic, and immutable, unchanging fact. That is the only kind of woman there is. And anybody who presents any other case is completely misguided. And hopefully at the end of this show, we'll have given you some basic rhetoric, some basic reason that you can fall back on in case you're not comfortable making that argument. But my goodness, how in the world did we get here?
Well, look, God has an opinion about this. And so you mentioned a bunch of things, George, when you were talking about changing truisms and calling something that it's not, but what it really is something different. It always brings me back to Isaiah 5:20, right? And it says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Definitions matter. When you talk about moral and good and what's bad and what's acceptable and inclusiveness and this and that and women and men. I mean, these are who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet. This, it goes from serious to less serious, but it's all couched in deception, right? So evil for good, good for evil, darkness for light, light for darkness, with definitions of right or wrong, and even the confusion of bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. I mean, I love that it covers everything, 3 different levels of seriousness in our society, starting with the most important, evil, good, good, evil, and then darkness, light, light, darkness, kind of definitions of right and wrong. And then here, bitter, sweet, sweet, good, meaning deception. Man for woman, woman for man. I mean, this covers it all right there in Isaiah 5:20. Woe to that society. Because God designed all this for us as followers of Jesus Christ, for Christians, and for other monotheistic societies. I mean, Islamic people think the same way. Jewish, of course, feel the same way. But forget about any religion. Everybody used to think this way. The atheists used to believe this. I mean, and should still defend this, even if forget about any religious aspect to this or faith aspect to this. Just biology, basic biology, tells you that definitions of women and men have always been through their gender and their genitalia and the way their bodies are designed. And so the question is, it's not what's the definition of a woman, because today's standard has redefined that, this revisionism movement. The question you have to ask yourself, and nobody that advocates on this other side about gender fluidity that they defend this can answer this question: what are the physical characteristics of a woman? That's the question that should be asked. What are the physical characteristics of a man? And we understand that obviously the genitalia is different. A biological man, a true man, the only kind of man out there, cannot give birth to a baby. It just can't happen. The tubes are different. Everything works differently. There needs to be an egg and a sperm, and the sperm comes from the male, egg comes from a female. The womb is different. I mean, the organs are different. The parts are different. The tubing is different. It's just different.
Yeah,
I mean, there truly is nothing controversial about that. This is not a controversial
It becomes
topic.
controversial when things are redefined. Let me tell you how it's redefined. So a woman wishes to be a man, right? So that is a trans man, a trans dude, Okay.
So, I mean, a woman,
So,
it's biologically a woman wants to be a man.
right.
Okay, that's
And therefore, if that woman gets pregnant, see what happens? Men can get pregnant. See that? Wow, that's brilliant. And that is, of course, impossible in the real world. Okay, where real people with clear minds operate. That's of course.
I'm going to say
that's of course impossible.
Can we go biology class? A human being with a penis and testicles cannot have a baby. Can help make a baby. You just can't bear a child. I mean, it's
Right.
biological. Don't freak out. I mean, I'm not saying it in a crude way. There's other terms I could use. I'm not. And then, and the only human being that can bear a child, that can hold a child to term, is a woman that has fallopian tubes and a vagina, and then ultimately gives birth and blesses this society and our world with children. It's beautiful.
Right. And that's
why women should be revered.
That's
It's
just not a biblical
thing.
reality. That is a biological reality. And so where did this start? This is where we get back to the changing, what Nico said, the changing of manuals, the changing of objective written standards that drive disciplines. This ultimately, in my view, this has been going on for a while. But man, the gates flew wide open when the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, which is, I believe, an APA product, an American Psychological Association or American Psychiatric Association, changed a gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria. Yeah. See, gender identity disorder is actually what it is. It's a disorder. It assumes that there is a norm and that there is a significant psychological deviation from that norm. And so it calls it a disorder. And it didn't do it to dig on people.
No, it didn't.
It did it to identify that something was wrong and that we should have some sort of intervention.
Yeah.
And
Loving intervention.
Of
That's
course.
exactly right.
And a clinical intervention, a therapeutic intervention. It was meant to redirect people and to put in treatment plans to reorient people back to a state of normalcy for their sake, and by the way, for the sake of society. Because operating in the background is this notion that if this happened to everyone, we'd be in trouble, obviously.
Well, George, how is it any different? Let me just give another example.
I was going to give the percentages of
I'm
people.
sorry. Go ahead. Go finish
I was just going to say that.
I wanted to make a point while you're making it. Go ahead.
I was going to say this is a statistically insignificant number of people. I didn't say that people were insignificant. I'm saying it's a statistically insignificant number of people. The latest research puts adult males who consider themselves transgender at somewhere between 0.005 and 0.14%. Okay? Yes, you heard that correctly. Can you count that low? Well, if you're an adult female, it's even less. It's somewhere around 0.002 to 0.003. So 2 to 3 1,000ths of a percent. That's nuts that we are turning society upside down for a statistically insignificant portion of the population. It's not like this is an epidemic. Our response, the abuse of this to beat up the majority, is an epidemic. But the problem itself is not an epidemic. And so I guess I want to go back to the question of what's going on here, Nico.
I think we have a question.
Why is this happening?
We'll have a question. Don't forget this thought, because I want to plant a seed. I want the question. I'm sure the question is going to be about Canada, because this is where we need to talk about what's going on in Canada. But let me just ask this. What would we do as a society, secular, Christian, Islamic, anyone with any form of reason, if we're sitting at a table, George and I, and just say a young woman walks up to us, and literally we see her ribs outside of her skin, and she's frail and skinny, and we say, honey, let's get you something to eat. Hold on, ma'am or sir, we get some food for this young lady? And she goes, no, thank you both gentlemen very much. I am grossly overweight. What is that called? Anorexia. Anorexia. It's a body dysphoria. In her mind, she perceives herself, in our example, it could be a boy, a male, she perceives herself as being overweight when the reality is she's not. She's grossly and dangerously underweight. And so we have to intervene lovingly and try to help that person, because it's destructive. Now, and how can you say that's destructive? Because when a child is at a young age told that they're confused about male biological parts and how to identify people. That's destructive. I'm sorry. We're called as Christians in Proverbs, I think it's 22, start a child up in the way they will go. When they get older, they will not depart from it. It is up to us as stewards of children. God has entrusted these beautiful, beautiful creations, these children, into our hands. As a society, but also as specific family leaders and members, we're to raise a child up with principles of parameters, right? Male and female, right and wrong, definitions of right and wrong, what good is, what is evil, what is good, worshiping God, knowing that we're going to leave this earth, what happens when that happens, and what happens on earth while we're here affects eternity, because we're all eternal beings, whether you're a Christian or not. It's where you spend eternity that's the problem. And so, so why is that okay? Why is it okay societally?
In your example, you're suggesting we see somebody who is suffering outwardly.
No, we're seeing someone that has a true dysphoria, they're looking at things non-realistically.
I was going back to your self-starving.
That's right. So I'm comparing the two. Someone who thinks that they're overweight is really not. Someone who thinks they're a male or female,
no, but they're
really
doing
not.
something destructive with that. That thinking is causing them to throw up. It's causing them to lose excessive weight, right. And eventually this has cardiac issues, and it could die, and it happens all the time. I mean, this is a serious problem. I mean, of course, the first example comes to mind is Karen Carpenter, which was a horrible loss. I mean, we'll never get a voice like that back, in my view. But setting that aside, to your point, there's a physical manifestation of an inward problem, right? Because it's rooted in a destructive sense of self-worth.
But society tells us it's okay to address that dysphoria. That wrong look at society because it's destructive.
Maybe then, but not now.
But don't look at this one.
No, sure.
I mean, so it's right. Logically inconsistent to me.
Yep.
There's actually a dysphoria. There's actually a condition where people believe there should be amputees. I don't know the name of the condition, where they want to amputate their limb. I mean, what do? We don't say go ahead. We stop it. And so I get that they're not apples and apples, but what we're saying is it's looking at reality differently. And there's reality in the sense of males have certain physical characteristics, females have certain physical characteristics, and those physical characteristics and biological makeup have different functions for how we multiply in society.
But to use your example in the original example, going back to the original example, we have professionals.
Well, but they call it chest feeding.
That is quite
a
true.
woman in today's bullshit society, standards out there, that a woman with all of her uniqueness that we should be celebrating because God designed women. They're beautifully and wonderfully made, right? Psalm 139. And they have a special role that blesses society. We cannot function without the role of a woman. That a woman is supposed to say, you're not breastfeeding because you're chest feeding. That's bullshit. And where's the church? You know, where's the church and all this stuff?
This guy's hot today, man. He is. He's rocking and rolling.
Well,
so the biblical model, the biblical
man.
model, and you were probably going to cite them, but Genesis 1, 26 to 31, Genesis 2, 18 to 25. That's kind of the early model for marriage, and then of course Ephesians chapter 5. 18. I'd read 18 to 33. That whole block. Matthew 19, chapter 19, verses 4 through 6.
George is probably read it in Greek.
So the biblical model is a monogamous heterosexual marriage. That's the ultimate manifestation of a healthy male-female relationship. But it's a complementarian but distinct roles.
Yes.
So we complement each other so that I can make up for your weaknesses. You can certainly make up for mine. That's the design here. There are certain things that men are not designed for and cannot do that women are. I can't believe I have to sit here and explain this. But it's a complementarian model.
Beautifully.
It's a beautiful complementarian model. There are social role distinctions, which somehow got really controversial in the age of absolutely hyper radical feminism. And I'm a feminist. I'm just not a radical freaking nut job.
I'm a biblical feminist.
That is, that believes that it's a good idea for women to hate men. That's sort of way out here. I believe that women should be cherished. They should be loved. They should be appreciated. Again, it's the model of Ephesians chapter 5, 18 to 33. Women should submit themselves. Oh, everybody calm down. Women should submit themselves wives should submit
My
themselves.
fiance listening.
Now, I want to be clear about this because women should be submitting themselves to men. The Bible doesn't really say that.
Yeah,
It says that it doesn't say that at all. It says that a wife should submit herself to her husband. However, a husband should what?
Submit to Christ.
Should love
her
and I
like
guess I always
Christ
ask the
loved the
question:
church.
why would a woman not to be supportive, to be the chief cheerleader of her man, if the man is loving her as Christ loved the church?
Why are you bringing that up?
Why? No, because it's completely related.
No, because I have an opinion about all this.
This, of course you do.
Right.
But you better. But this is totally related. It totally fits. It makes sense. It's a coherent, comprehensive way of looking at male-female relationships. But absolutely, it's complementarian. It's absolutely distinct. There's no question that it's distinct, but it's complementarian. That's the biblical model. And so I guess I come back and I say, why, to the original question, why are we here? Why are we even talking about this? Why is this even a controversy? And the reason is because you said at the top of the show, there is a political drive here. There's a political agenda that is exploiting what is meant to be beautiful distinctions, and they're being weaponized to create absolute chaos in families and society. Why?
Look,
why is that happening? That's where I want to get
Larry's
to.
made a
but I'll shut
comment.
up.
I mean, first of all, the Bible was not written there. You know this answer. The Bible was not written by a bunch of white
Some
guys.
old white
It was written
guys.
by Jewish people and Greeks and a lot of.
old white guys.
who said that, Larry?
Well, no, he's
I'll
not,
put
he's
it up.
saying they. Larry's not advocating that.
I'll put it up.
just
No,
So
I'm
you
not saying
can
Larry is, but he's saying we have some people here on this forum,
No,
or
no,
just
no,
in
no,
general.
In society. But it's
Making
again,
sure.
it's a straw man argument. It's an absolute straw man argument. And
White
so
guys.
I always say I have a talk. George and I have a talk, and I'm a biblical feminist. So when people say, "Are you a feminist?" Yes, I'm a biblical feminist, and it's a beautiful. There's no misogyny in Christianity. We dissect Ephesians 5. It's a beautiful dissection. Proverbs 30. Read Proverbs 31:10 all the way down to 19. There's no way you can think that there's misogyny in a biblical worldview. Now, there were some cultural people. Culturally, there were some idiots back then. I got that, but that wasn't advocated biblically.
Yeah, I've heard.
You have to make that distinction with what God was advocating and the roles of man and woman, which were beautiful, and the whole submission, which if hermeneutically, like we always say, meaning translation, if you handle the linguistics, the language, the culture, right? Submit just means to support the mission. Well, what is she supporting? I will submit myself to my husband. I submit myself to my dentist. I submit myself to my home builder. I submit myself to a lawyer. I support the mission of this person to bless me. So a woman is called biblically a wife, not a woman. A wife is called to submit herself to her husband, meaning I'm going to support your mission, honey. Wait a minute. What's your mission? To love you like Christ loved the church. Oh, shit. How did Christ love the church? He lived for the church. He sacrificed for the church, and he died for the church. What wife would not support that mission? And then you go to 1 Peter 3 and says, hey, husband, hey, dumb ass, listen to me. If you don't love your wife the way I tell you to love your wife, don't even bother praying to me. Holy shit, that'll wake you up. So, I mean, it's this complementary leadership, but it's servant leadership. And so we love teaching on biblical marriages because there's no way that a wife understanding and being in a true biblical marriage, knowing that the husband will lay his life down, his selfishness, his needs, whatever, and live and sacrifice and die for his wife because that's his duty to be a leader, but that comes with tremendous responsibility. And when she is submitting and supporting that mission, it's voluntary submission. There's no compulsory submission. There's no, you better support this. No, it's, I want to because I trust the Christ in you. You are wrapped in flesh, so you're effed up. But I trust the Jesus Christ in you. I trust your submission to Christ, which means that you love me in a certain way. So we're just giving you Cliff Note versions. We break this down biblically, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's a wonderful, as you said earlier,
I think we've done that. I think we've done that. Started in Genesis.
Started back to male-female stuff.
Maybe I'm just lost as a fart in the wind. Larry, I'm going to come back here. I think I know what you were trying to say, but I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the nuttery that we hear from left-wing cultic America. I have never heard it said that the Bible is written by a bunch of old white guys. The Constitution Yes, maybe the declaration, but I've never heard it said that the Bible. I mean, give me a break here. We go from ancient Near East, not too many white guys there, to Hebrews and Middle Eastern people. So and Africans. So I'm still waiting for the white guy people. But okay, I guess let me know who said that. I need a good laugh.
Translations and stuff like
that.
Well,
I know, but to the male female.
But we don't like straw men, so I just want to be careful.
I got it.
All right.
Come on, what's the question?
We got a question.
Well, adding on to your point, Mr. Nico, about the whole thing, about eroding the definitions between male and female and the whole chest feeding. They're trying to get rid of the definition of mother, too. Now it's birthing people. It has to be all about inclusivity around it.
Shit my pants. That drives me insane. I mean,
you see what you're going to make him do?
Insane. See that? I'm an old guy. Don't make me do these things. Look,
birthing people.
But this is my point. Think about this, guys. But the church should be leading this charge. Because these definitions in Genesis 1:27, in Genesis 2, God created. Let us create men in our own image. That's a reference to the Trinitarian God, right? 3 persons in one being. We can talk about that on another show. We've done it in the past. And then male and female. Let's make them male and female. Matthew 19, Jesus himself is referencing back to Genesis 1 when he's talking about male and female leaving your mom and dad and becoming one. Yes, of course, physically through the beautiful act of intercourse between husband and wife. Yes, it's beautiful, and yes, you should enjoy it if you're married, and yes, you should have plenty of it.
Yeah.
Get over it.
It's pretty beautiful.
We get a little corny, but what I'm saying is God has a prescription for sex also, and we've talked about that on the show. And so we can't get goofy with this stuff. We've got to be just real practical, understand, properly handle the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15, and part of that truth is understanding God's creation of biology, the beautiful role of a woman, the beautiful role of the complementary man coming together to create life, to be fruitful and multiply, to create life. Biologically, certain things fit really nicely in other things, and then life is created. And under the right circumstances, it's a beautiful thing and a wonderful thing. And then more male and female are created. It's really a simple issue. We don't have to be disrespectful. We can be very compassionate about it, but we also need to be resolute about it. We have to properly handle this issue, and the church should be leading. And it has consequences.
The church isn't going to...
Again, going back to Penn State, we talked about it on Saturday's show. We've talked about it in here before. I mean, you have a guy a male. He's got genitalia as a male. He's got mass and muscles and thickness of his muscle. His lung capacity is different. And he competed for his first at Penn State, right? Is it Penn State?
I think I thought it was University of Pennsylvania, but you could be right.
What the hell do I know? But I mean, for 3 years, he competed as a male. I can't believe I'm saying that, but as a male.
Because he is a male.
Well, yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But that's true. And then the last year he said, I identify as a female. He competed as a female, and he's kicking the shit out of people.
He's now Leah Thomas.
Okay, but he's beat
Leah Thomas.
He didn't have the transition. He took some hormones.
No, he's transitioning.
Okay, but I'm really not trying to be condescending. I'm just being practical. It sounds weird, and when you handle it, it sounds like you're being condescending because it's such it's
absurd.
It's derailment where we are off the rails of reality. When you talk about people that decline, they deny climate change and they deny all this stuff. Well, how about denying biology? How about denying the rights and the duties of women that are beautiful and that we should be advocating for? How about that? No one's doing that. I don't understand.
No, but hold on a second.
Selective outrage.
But this is why I'm going to be serious about this for a moment. It's absolutely absurd to take individuals who are an infinitesimal portion of the population. We just said what it was, and then to take what is clearly established disorder and then impose that on society as okay. And if society pushes back and say, wait, this has never been okay. It's been a matter of psychological science that it's never been okay. It's been that way since 2013, when apparently the geniuses at the APA decided to change the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual and not call it a disorder anymore and call it dysphoria. What's gender dysphoria? Well, now it's not about, hey, something's wrong because the standard is the fact that you are a biological female or a biological male. That's the standard. We're going to reorient you back to that. So they scrapped that standard, and now it was redefined as the stress that you experience between what you perceive yourself to be and what you actually are biologically. See that? Now they're targeting whatever it is you feel. It's about what you feel. And they want to reorient the science towards what you feel versus saying there's an actual biological standard here and something's wrong that you don't acknowledge that. And so we need to engage professionals and therapeutic systems and processes to kind of reorient you to. And the church used to be very much a part of that. But now we flip the whole thing on its head, and we say that what you feel and what you perceive is the standard, and that all of science and all of society and the church itself needs to reorient itself to you. That's insane. That's the upside down kingdom. And so that's the issue that I have. You take a disorder, you call it something wonderful, and then you impose that on society. And when society comes back and says, you're nuts, then you go after those people.
Go after them and then name call them.
What are we doing?
How come when we say, if I said to someone, you have to conform to what Jesus says, they're going to be like, hey, you can't force your personal beliefs and your convictions
Because
on me.
we
All of
let
a sudden, that's...
But there's no logical. Leftism has no logic.
These are civilizational beliefs.
It's logically inconsistent.
Okay?
But play this out, because let's say that you're blessed, or your daughters, or your granddaughters, or your nieces, or your cousins, or whatever, your children, your daughters are blessed enough to be in the WNBA, and then we allow this departure from reality to continue, and take it to its logical conclusion. So you're going to have a bunch of mamalukes that don't make it into the NBA, maybe, and they're B League players, which are damn good players, by the way. They're just not NBA players. Forget the WNBA, identify as a woman. Now the WNBA becomes the NBA again.
NBA 2.
Yeah, like 2.0 or whatever you want to call it. And then women are screwed out of that. I go, at what point do we start truly defending women's sports? Women in general, period. I mean, to honor women. Women have breasts. I guess it's in their chest region. I'm not going to get all scientific. They have breasts. A woman has a vagina. Men do not have vaginas. A man cannot give birth. A man cannot hold a baby. A man cannot produce. I mean, men have sperm. Males have sperm. Women have eggs. I mean, this is biology 101. I mean, so when you think that we have to talk about this, what is being taught in our classes today? When you have teachers, I saw these videos this week of saying, now what in my class? And now you're teaching our children this indoctrination that if they go into a legitimate objective biology class next door, they're going to be taught something different, and we don't think that's going to have consequences on our future societies. We're already seeing it now because this didn't happen yesterday. Let me tell you one of the blessings of this pandemic crap. And I'm not saying that's not a real virus. You know our opinion on this, but this has been taken way out of whack. Okay, that's another show. You can go back to old shows. But parents in Virginia, actually, a lot of parents around the country, because the kids were stuck at home wrongfully for a long time. It's like, what the hell are they learning? Hey, Fred, what are they learning?
Yeah, exactly.
What the shit? What? Are you kidding me? How long have you been studying this crap?
What did the teacher just say?
Yeah, and parents are like, they woke up and they said, bullshit. The parents said bullshit. Yeah. And they started going back. And then they pushed back at these school board meetings. And then you got federal agents coming in and all the political backlash from it. So we can talk about that some other time. But where was the church in all of this? Where were the followers of Jesus Christ saying, stop, guys, we're going to advocate biological, biblical truth that happen to work perfectly together, by the way. Why aren't they leading the charge instead of going along to get along? This is not, well, it's none of my business. No bullshit, it is your business. It absolutely is your business. We are supposed to be the arbiters and the gatekeepers of truth. Jesus came, John 8:31, to testify that if you're truly my disciples, then you will know the truth, heavenly truth, and the truth will what? Set you free. Are we not in bondage because definitions of truth are being stolen and being redefined? We're in bondage. Jesus came, John 18, to testify to the truth. Truth of heaven, truth of salvation. I understand that. The gospel truth, I get that too. But objective truth.
That's right.
Truth in general, that's God's characteristic. The Holy Spirit is called the Spirit of truth, right? God, if you look at Proverbs 6:16, think about it. Go back and read it. There's 6 things he detests, and 7th the 6 he hates, and the 7th he detests. And 4 out of the 6 or 7 of them are rooted in deception. God hates lies because it's antithetical to his character. So any lie, period, end of story. Why do you think we used to swear on so help me God, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. Truth matters to our society. That we in the court of law, up until fairly recent, that we used to say that oath, that phrase, and put our hand on a Bible and say, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God if I lie. Why? Because when you're in a court of law and you're in front of your peers and you're in front of fellow citizens and either someone's liberty or money's at stake or whatever it is, you better bring the truth with you because truth matters. And then we're in a society where truth doesn't matter? How confusing is that to our young people? Have I said too much?
No, man. I it's like, where do I start?
That
was a meal. I was just trying to track some comments here that you guys are making. I think that there's hope, Nico, as long as people push back where they are, because I think that's where this cancer is really spreading, is that people feel intimidated. Yeah. They don't speak up. They know that something is fundamentally wrong, and it's insane. I mean, it's literally insane. It's not a sane thing to say that men are women and women are men. That's not sane. That's insane, right? You would have been committed. You literally, if you really fundamentally believe that in polite society, and even in polite society, you would have been committed not too long ago. And the idea that this is now parroted about as the new standard, that's unbelievably dangerous. So what's going on here? What's going on is really a unmaking of American society and going after those basic pillars that have created and contributed to order in American society. And if you don't think totally turning upside down the basic American family, right? What is a woman? What is a man? What is a mom? What is a dad, right? What is the best environment in which kids should be raised? Is it a good idea? And really, they always talk about ideas, right? What's a good idea and what's a bad idea?
Ideas have consequences.
Right. Is it a good idea to confuse those roles? Is it a good idea to confuse what marriage really is? Is it a really good idea to confuse what sexuality should look like? Is that a really good idea? Is it a good idea to make those things be whatever you want them to be? Does that sound like a really good idea? So we have to have an environment where we can clearly express dissent about these things. Thank God for the Constitution. Thank God for the First Amendment. We need to use that like we've never used it before. But I always caution people, make sure you have something intelligent to say. Don't just make noise. Don't be irritating. Don't be annoying, okay? Have something intelligent to say, and then find a way, and be prayerful about it, and be studious about it. Find a way to say it constructively, informatively, but push the envelope. Challenge people. And I'm worried, Jeff, you're looking at me because we've been talking about the
Don't
rot.
worry, not like that.
The rot. No, I was thinking the rot in the church. We talk about this a lot. The church isn't even a place where we can talk about this. Did you know that? Did you know that that's really dangerous? I mean, if you can't talk about this in the church because you're seen as a troublemaker,
think about that.
Where can you talk about it?
If you can't talk about gender in the church, if you can't talk about marriage in the church, if you can't talk about sexuality in the church, if you can't talk about abortion in the church, I mean, it's going to be soon. It's not hard to think that you can't even talk about Jesus in the church because he's so exclusive. Well, he is exclusive. John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. That is an exclusive statement. Truth, by definition, is exclusive.
Yeah, so much for inclusivity, right?
Is not 3.9. 2 plus 2 is not 4.1. 2 plus 2 is something, no matter what language you say it in, there are objective truths. And there's objective truth in the Bible that are transcendent. They're also earthly, and they're consistent with science. That is a false bullshit bullshit choice to choose science or your faith. George and I go into very detailed teachings on science and how it beautifully, from age of the earth to everything else in Genesis, all the way to Revelations, beautiful, beautiful marriage of truth and science, because science is the rational pursuit of truth, and God is truth. His word is truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and so it's a beautiful marriage. And it's just improper, is that the word? Improper handling of truth. And that's unfortunate the church has gone down that path. And then we have confusion. And so we need to defend women. Biological, true women, we need to defend them. And the church should be leading the charge.
Yeah, and people need to understand that there's a lot of politics behind this for a reason. The unmaking of the nuclear family is a fundamental tenet of communism. It absolutely is. If you guys haven't gotten W. Cleon Skousen's book, he's a former CIA guy. We're going back to 1958, but that book has, man, I'm telling you, everything that is discussed in that book, the arguments that are made, and the predictions. There are assumptions that are made and predictions of what will happen to American society. If those assumptions ever actually become law, or if they become norms, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how accurate he is. You guys should get that. And he discusses this unmaking of the nuclear family, the removal of the woman from the home, the push to get women to outcompete men, or to get women to actually be men, to be the primary providers of the home. And to essentially erase men, to make them invisible. And so, man, you should get the book. It's called The Naked Communist. No, it's not a sexual term. It's the notion that exactly. Yeah. It's the notion that there were clear evidences of this kind of ideology taking root in American society. And he was pointing that out. And anyway, I think you should get it. I think you should read it. And I think I would challenge anyone, and please come back and raise it on this show. Is there anything that he's saying that you think is detached or wrong? He's absolutely spot on. But this is a key tenet of communism: going after basic male-female roles, creating tensions between the two roles, really having men just sort of disappear, and become less and less relevant in American society. This is all very deliberate. These are the politics that are influencing American society today.
But the fact that this is a serious conversation, and it's critical conversation, really says where our society has gone.
Yeah, and what hope is there, Nico, if the church doesn't step into the gap here and reassert biblical standards? I always say that, man, can you guys think of an organization that's actually doing what they should be doing? And of course, that's a rhetorical question. The answer is usually no. But I have to give credit where credit is due. I think the Family Research Council on this issue has been phenomenal. I think it's run by Tony Perkins. Is that correct? Absolutely phenomenal organization. They've done amazing research, well footnoted research. They discuss issues like homosexuality, transgenderism. They talk about the biological counter-arguments, the philosophical counter-arguments, the biblical counter-arguments to the nonsense that we're hearing in society. Please, you guys, if you can follow them, I guess that's the term. If you can pray about the possibility of giving to that organization, you certainly should. I think they're doing a lot of good. And I think, man, I'd love to see Tony Perkins do rounds on Sunday mornings in pulpits. I would love it.
The thing I wanted to add to both of y'all is about the truth statement of how God obviously values truth, because that's his character. And I was texting George the other day about it, how every time Jesus talked, he would always start by saying, I tell you the truth, or what,
Yeah,
and it's
phrase that was used
to, I mean, that's
he's
obviously
emphasizing the importance of it,
yes.
right? I mean, so truth matters to Jesus. He cannot lie. God's word does not come back void. So if you say the only thing, God can do anything, he can't lie. God cannot contradict himself, because that's he cannot he can't break the law of non-contradiction. He can't be something and not be something at the same time. Those are the only things God can't do. He can't lie. He's not going to lie. He's very consistent. He's logically consistent. He doesn't violate that law of non-contradiction. That's an objective law.
And he seemed to really show this, Nico, in the Sermon on the Mount, is where he really started doing this. And then he went about, the surrounding regions, Galilee and Capernaum, practicing it. But he really embedded his Sermon on the Mount this way. And I think it's interesting because the church thinks it's noble to not be, quote unquote, political, right? And somehow Christian and Christ-like. I mean, it's absolutely the inversion of the truth. What I think is interesting is that Jesus said, before he said the truth is, he said, you have heard that it was said.
Right.
So he says what the common knowledge is, or what the common belief system is, right? And then he blows a hole in it by saying, but I say unto you, I give you the alternative. So what is interesting is, I think we should take that model and we should see it practiced from the pulpits everywhere. Is it an alternative, or is
he clarifying, like, what God commanded? Is it an alternative?
Well, in many cases, he is clarifying, of course, because they've taken a standard and they've twisted it. right? So it's an abuse, really kind of an abuse of Old Testament law. But in some cases, he's actually adding to it. What I wanted to say is that sermon should be the standard, in my view, for what we should see in pulpits today. Yeah. We should be able to come back and say, hey, society is saying this and this and this about these critical issues. And yes, we should talk about all the red hot button issues that are dividing people.
But Jesus says.
Sexuality, right? And we always talk about systemic racism, and we always say there's no such thing as systemic racism as the Democrat Party positions it. Right. But there's absolutely systemic racism, for instance, in the area of life. We have Democratic policies right now, pro-abortion on-demand policies, that are absolutely ravaging the black community. In fact, you guys should read the writings of Ryan Baumberger, who is a pro-life leader. By the way, I know Ryan, and I know him from college. Our paths crossed ever so briefly at Messiah College way back in the 80s. Ryan's a good guy, and he's from Pennsylvania Dutchland out there in Lidditz in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Anyway, Ryan writes a lot on this because he is a child of rape, and his mother put him up for adoption.
Yeah.
And he is one of 15 kids, grew up in a loving family, a Christian family, devout Christian family. And he says, man, my family, we got Asians, we got blacks and whites, we've got Native Americans.
All adopted?
Absolutely. And he says, man, this is the way it should be. Right? You talk about no walls of hostility here. I love that. And then he has been challenging Biden's policies on abortion. And I love the way that he said it. He says, look, if you're really concerned about voter suppression, you're wiping out a whole group of individuals. Isn't that the ultimate example of voter suppression?
Yep.
You're killing them. I mean, it's just brilliantly argued. I think you guys should check him out. Ryan Baumberger, Bomberger. But where is the church on that issue? Where's the church on that? On the issue of life, right? This is the kind of thing that should be making its way to the pulpits. This is systemic racism because blacks are only 13% of the population, but yet 39 to 40% are being wiped out by systemically racist policy. Yes. The vast majority of Planned Parenthood
and
clinics are very close to areas where black population is through the roof. Yep. Right? Disproportionately so. And so what we have is a true genocidal impact right now. These policies are systemically racist. Absolutely. Right? Why aren't we bringing this stuff up? Yeah. Right? Bring stats, bring figures, bring arguments. Talk about how this is near and dear to the heart of God. I really think this whole idea of, you've heard that it was said, but I say unto you.
But he's making that comparison to society standard. Do what Romans 12. He's really, in Romans 12:2 emphasizes, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be what? Transformed by the renewing of your mind. When we give our lives to Christ, we're claiming something supernatural. We're saying that the Holy Spirit indwells in us, that we see the world differently, that we have this renewed mind, which means we have a renewed purpose, a renewed anointing, a renewed mission, and hopefully renewed behavior. Not perfect, renewed. So do not conform. James 4:4. If you're friends with the world, it'd be enmity with God. You'd be at enmity with God. You'd be opposed. Now he's talking about an ideology. 1 John 2 talks about what the world definition in that context means: the pride of life, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. It gives a definition page in 1 John 2 of what that world is. John 3:16 is a different definition of world. For God so loved the world. So we have context matters. We have to understand over and over again, Scripture is telling us, hey, if you look like everybody else, if you act like everybody else, then you are like everybody else, and maybe you haven't made a full commitment to me. That's what Jesus is saying. Because Jesus modeled it. Now, we have his perfect record. We just don't have his perfect behavior. And we have to, when we talk about sanctifying ourselves, sobering our flesh, our spirit from our flesh, we're intoxicated by the fleshly desires, and our spirit is perfectly in communication with God, but yet we get intoxicated by the flesh. The spirit and the flesh are like oil and water, Scripture says, and it's this constant taking our thoughts captive, as Paul says, not leaving a foothold for the enemy, Ephesians 4, Paul says again, and understanding that we constantly have to renew our mind and making sure that we stay in our
by the grace and empowerment of the Holy Spirit.
That's the true struggle. Sure. Paul also tells us that we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. It's tough shit. This is not easy. Anyone says like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go sing Kumbaya and everything's great and all this. No, I'm gonna speak in tongues all over the place. Okay, great, but that's not a real battle. I mean, that's why we cannot present this false ideology of what it means to be a Christian and that the struggle is real because life is real. That's it. And look at the disciples. Those are a bunch of dumbasses. I mean, they were all the way to the end. Jesus tells Peter, get behind me, Satan. James and John, the sons of thunder that wanted to kill everybody, they're arguing till the very end. Oh, I want to be on the right side. No, I'm going to be on his right side. No, what about me? Hey, what are you guys talking about? Nothing, Lord. Hi. I mean, this is at the end. He's like, man, you guys are dumbasses. Hey, can you stay up and pray? And they fall asleep. Man, when I first started studying the scripture, truly studying, not just reading it, I said, Jesus, he like specializes in refurbishing dumbasses. Man, I'm right in this mix with these guys. Peter's cutting off ears. He was going for the neck. I mean, he was a violent son of a bitch. James and John, all these people are broken asses. I mean, I love it. I mean, this guy, the historical Jesus fascinates me. And there's a practical side to this. I mean, that's just it. I mean, this is real stuff.
It's all practical.
And he said so many offensive,
including male and female. How about that?
It's all pragmatic. It really is. I to your point about clarification, Kanan, were you going to ask something?
Yes.
Go ahead,
just
ask.
to add on to the list of required readings, this was a book also recommended to me by my dad. It's called Irreversible Damage: The Transgender Craze by Abigail Schreier.
Yeah, it is a powerful book, and it was
Thank you.
It was outlawed, if you will, on Amazon for the longest time, and it actually, I think, is the Bible on this thing. You guys, if you want to read and equip yourself in the area of transgenderism,
let me answer a
check it
question
out.
real quick, because Henry asked this, and he always asks good questions. Henry Barrera, thanks, Henry, for asking the question. I'm glad I saw it. What about parents who allow their children to identify their gender? Okay, well, let's logically play that out. What if a kid goes up to their parents, I don't want to go to school. Okay, honey, you don't feel like going to school? Cool. I want to eat chocolate cake all day. Okay, great. I want to smoke weed in the house. Is that okay? Okay. Hey, I want to have sexual. I want to try this sexual stuff with the neighbor who's 40 next door. Okay, sure. Why not? I mean, of course you would say. I know you're probably not asking this for yourself. You're just posing the question that society. We need to take. Look, our children are under our dominion. Biblically, even in just non-biblically. I mean, they're your kids. They're responsible. Nobody would trust a kid to drive you across town. You're not going to trust a kid to fly. We don't even let kids drink. We don't let kids smoke. We don't let kids buy guns. We don't let kids, work under a certain age. We're going to let them choose their gender? I mean, it's logically inconsistent. And so it doesn't have to get goofy. We have to critically think through these issues. That means spar with ideas in their mind. Now we have to compare those ideas and what we're advocating to some source. So the atheist that has ideas, I always challenge them back to the source. Because if they can't give you a source, and they usually can't, then they're the source, then they're hypocritical in their advocacy, because we're submitting ourselves to an eternal, transcendent God. They're submitting themselves to an earthly, biological God, and it's a small g God, and it's themselves. Everybody submits themselves to some source and ideology or God, whether it's a big G God or small g God. And so if a child, parents absolutely should not they should be corrected. And they should be lovingly corrected, and they should be modeled on these things. And we should start a child up in the way they should go. And we should talk about these issues. And you set the tone. I'm very clear in our home, Davi and I, and George and Steph are as well, very clear in our homes what we believe. Jesus is primus. Jesus has a primary role in life. I've shared with you guys before, our 8-year-old, now jokingly, but it's serious, always says I'm her second favorite puppy. She told me this like 3 Father's Days ago, years ago. And she goes, Papi, happy Father's Day, you're my second favorite puppy. I said, okay, honey, well, who's your first? She goes, Papi, Jesus. I said, oh, fair enough, cool. I'm your second favorite puppy. And ever since then, Papi, I know I'm your second favorite puppy. And I'll take it. Jesus comes first, yes. Always, period, end of story. Yes. And it's this constant, the way they think. But then I'm practical with them also. Look, I mean, I don't want to shelter my kids from everything. We want to expose them to our kids do jujitsu, they wrestle, so physically, mentally, they're being exposed. They cry, get back in there. Anything broken? Nope, toe bad. Papi, I don't want to. Tough crap. You're going back in there. You're going to learn to defend yourself. You're going to challenge your body, your mind, your resolve, your fortitude. And then biblically, they want to understand. I mean, and so we have to guide our children in these things. We cannot let someone else raise our kids. I don't want Disney raising my kids. They suck. I definitely want Hollywood. I don't want the NBA. I don't want bullshit schools. God trusted me with these children and my wife. We're raising our children. And I'll be damned if someone's going to tell me how I'm going to raise my kid. They can go piss on themselves.
That's the only right attitude here, because think about the amount of time that your kids are being subjected to a completely opposing view. 7.5 hours a day, 12 years of school. Who's really getting a front row seat, with your kid? That's the problem. And the American educational system is not just, they're just not teaching this stuff. They're encouraging this stuff. They are. This is the problem. We have parents that are losing their rights left and right.
And they're handing them over.
Yeah.
They're handing them over.
I was just going to say, and it's because they're not in the fight. They're allowing it to happen. This is absolutely unacceptable. And I've said it in here a couple of times before, and I'm going to say it again. And I realize this could possibly be a hardship, but please pray seriously. The American public system is completely out of control. It is absolutely hostile. It's absolutely hostile to the biblical worldview. It's hostile to its own country. It's hostile to America. It teaches kids to hate themselves and to hate their country.
Churches need to gird up,
So,
George. Gird up.
pray.
Church bells. Get a pair of church bells. Gird up. 2 Timothy 1:7. God didn't give us a spirit of timidity, but of strength. Here's that sound mind, love, and all together, that we will absolutely screw up without the intervening of the Holy Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22. Absolutely, I would screw this up. You would, all of us would.
Indeed.
But for the grace of God.
But again, practically speaking, pray seriously about pulling your kids out of public school. Pray very seriously about that. I realize that it could be a hardship in some cases, but I promise you, nobody desires your child to grow up into being a good and godly servant of Jesus Christ more than God does, and he will make a way. So pray very seriously about that. This isn't, these aren't just little problems. This is a significant, hostile, full frontal assault against biblical worldviews, and it's happening all over the country. So pray very seriously about that. It is the only way we're going to get these folks' attention.
Well, man, look, our stupid asses could talk for hours about this. We're going to probably talk about it at some form or fashion Saturday. We have a radio podcast also called Sidebar, and we talk about more current events. Of course, it's through the lens of some set of ideologies, and we usually go through a constitutional freedom set. I mean, we believe in faith, family, and freedom. That's kind of our focus on these shows and what we do, and that's a biblical idea, faith. So we get our ideas and our ideology from heaven, right? Because ideas have consequences, and we believe we can defend that. We can properly handle the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15, do your best to show yourself approved to God, a worker, and that's what we're doing, we're working, who is not embarrassed, key, because many Christians are embarrassed of their faith, to properly handle, not just handle, properly handle the word of truth. There's that word again, truth. And so that takes effort. I mean, if you know more about college football teams and pro football teams than your faith that deals with your eternity, and you don't know when you're going to experience eternity, by the way, you do your best to prolong it, but you don't know when that's going to happen. I don't understand. We don't have a sense of urgency. We should. That's why we're called to go out and make disciples of men and women, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. Matthew 28:19, we'll say it over and over again. It's a political statement. That's an influential statement. You have to compare ideas. That's what you're doing. You're comparing worldly ideas with heavenly ideas, and you're comparing worldly teachings to Jesus' teachings. And you got to see who makes Paul made the case all the times to the Greeks in Athens, right? We're talking about that. He's appealing to them logically. He wasn't doing miracles. He was debating them from a logical, consistent point. He was talking to the religiously, the Sanhedrin, and then the Greek leaders, and all these different groups, and he's winning people over with logic, and he got his ass kicked for it.
Every Christian is a student, and every Christian is an educator. If you're out there talking about the gospel, then surely you must understand the gospel, and hopefully you can educate people in the gospel and give them a reason to come to Jesus. And then, of course, you need to understand the circumstances in which the people that you're talking to are living in, the things that are ailing them. Be a good listener. Stop and listen to what's ailing them. And for goodness sakes, you guys see what's going on, right? I mean, you understand the things that people are struggling with today and that are pulling people apart. Be a good student. Learn up. Understand what's going on. Invest in the facts and pray. Seek the Lord and ask, what's your role in your church, for goodness sakes? If your leadership is going astray, ask the Lord. Ask the Lord what your role is. How can you challenge them? What's the best way to challenge them
Speak the
lovingly?
truth in love, Ephesians
right?
4:15.
What's the best way to do that? There's a formula for that, Matthew 18:15-20. Read that and ask the Lord to see how you can employ that in your church. I mean, we have lost touch with church discipline altogether because nobody wants to offend anybody and nobody's name wants to end up on social media. Everybody's scared. But the time has come. The time to be silent is over,
now,
man.
guys,
It's
everybody.
over.
Oh, I'm just one person. You're still one person. So Rio, fishers of men, what are we fishing with, right, brother? Rio, I went to high school with that guy. Good to see you, Daddy. God bless you. Kirk, we like Vody Bachman. He's a great teacher.
He is.
I believe he's doing
He's a good
well.
guy.
He had a heart issue. He had a really serious heart issue. I think he's doing well. I hope he is. Kirk, make a comment. Give me an update.
Yeah.
He did. I know he came back for that heart surgery. He's bold. And then someone's asking Kanan a question about the name of the book you mentioned, Kanan. Just gonna pull that up really quick. Julia, that's
Abigail.
for you.
Called Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze, Seducing Our Daughters. It's by Abigail Schreier.
How you spell Schreier?
Damage.
How you spell Schreier?
Oh, Schreier.
Okay, there
She's
you go.
exceptional. Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks. Hope this benefited somebody. Share it with somebody because, of course, Facebook shadow banned us because we said something to piss off somebody. We don't give a shit, but it's just the way it is. We got to keep going, but we can't boost anymore. We used to get anywhere between 10 and 25,000 views.
We still can't boost?
Well, we can, but it's under their rules,
Their terms of service.
and they can cut us off like that. So we're working on.
Okay.
It's a slow process on a website. So if we get cut off here, at least there's somewhere we can direct you guys. So until then, we keep working, whether it's 2 people or 2 million people that come on every week. We know we're just going to be obedient to what Christ asks us to do. You guys have a blessed week. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll hopefully see you next week.